Hello. I thought I'd kick off the American Dream Factory podcast. Today, we were going to be having Neil Milet, but Neil actually just emailed a few minutes ago. I'll read you his email, and we're rescheduling it, but the subject line is can we reschedule? I have come down with COVID and I'm really sick today. I wanted to push through and be in the episode, but can we reschedule? I'm very sorry, but I want this to be good and it just won't be today. Now, Neil Milet lives in Indiana in a town of 600 people. It's where he grew up. He has a background in farming and he's helping the community become a rural innovation engine. 600 people. And I really am excited about doing that podcast and I'll get it rescheduled. So if you were looking forward to it, trust me, we'll still get it done. And I apologize if you're not able to, catch it now because Neil's not here. I get it. But in the future, when we do this, we're going to dial in specifically on real innovation in real small towns because that's a hard thing to do. I can share this from a experience. We've worked in communities of 1,000 people, under 1,000 people. We've set up coding schools, helped people design apps in these different communities as well. We did a whole rapid learning program with the Land Grant University and with Apple in the town where Napoleon Dynamite was filmed. So I get it. And I'm excited to talk with Neil specifically about how he's doing it, how he's rebuilding a downtown opera house, which is awesome. It's this old center of town in this small farming community of Indiana, and how he's doing it through pulling all the community members together. It's not just Neil on his own, which is pretty special. So apologies that he's not here today because he has COVID, if you didn't catch that. But we will reschedule it. We'll do it with Neil, and it will be me interviewing Neil, unpacking his story, his return, how he works with the farmers, how he works with the schools, how he works with the local government, how he works with the federal programs, big corporations to bridge between farming, tech, robotics, and even construction, mitigating probably asbestos. We're going to get into everything that is about how do you build an innovation economy in a small town. It's hard. And so today, what I want to do is I was going to take a little bit of time and I'm going to tell you specifically about an approach that we use in creating a vision for cities of any size, an economic vision, and how we do sentiment mapping and how we analyze data. And it's called the realignment theory. I write about it in my book, but I'll give you the basics of it here. My book, if you would like it, it's called Better, Rethinking Our Social, Civic, and Economic Systems. And you can snag it on Amazon if you look it up. I'm getting ready to drop the audiobook as well. But the basics that I want to run through on the three different approaches of the realignment theory or the realignment thesis is that there are really three stakeholders when you're working with a community of any size. First is the client. Who is it? Like, who's the one who is saying, let's reimagine, rebuild this specific community, and let's turn it into something powerful? Next is you have, on top of the client, you have the local community members, the families, the small businesses, the schools, the teenagers, the kids who hang out behind the 7-Eleven, whatever it is. Third, you have big industry players, corporations that are in the state that need talent, need innovation, corporations around the world that are looking for talent and innovation. And the job is how do you realign all of those to where there's a vision in the middle that helps the stakeholder get super excited, helps the locals believe in the vision. And then third, takes that last piece, which is the big corporations, and aligns them with this vision as well so that they can support this flywheel. I'll explain that in a second. But this process of doing the mapping first, there's an intake process with the client where you really need to understand what are their goals. Is it that they want to see a stronger economy, stop the brain drain, a more resilient tax base, a better downtown? Every client has something. When I say clients, often it's a city, a philanthropy, a university, some group that has a hope, a desire, an outcome. And it's pretty explicit. They could say a lot of things, but when you really start digging deeper, you'll understand there's a very specific thing they want. I mentioned a whole handful of them. Next is get into the desk data. And when I say get into the desk data, what I mean is what is the historic tax base look like? What have been the exports, the imports, the graduation rate, the birth rate in the community, the price of homes, the patents, new businesses formed, businesses closed. You try and suck up as much of that economic data that often is sitting in reports that the city has on shelves or somewhere through some programs, and you can analyze that data, pull it together. Next, now that you have the target's goal and their desk data, you then move into the second group, which is the sentiment mapping. And in the sentiment mapping, now you're meeting with the employers of the town, parents, teachers, administrators, bartenders, baristas, cooks, people who are walking the streets, people in thrift stores, people in churches. You go everywhere. And it's a little bit like CIA meets economic development, to where you live in the town. Like, you actually live in the town as someone who's doing this. You work with other locals who are trusted agents. And together you start to put together this map by asking questions that we list out a bunch of them in my book, but we have a whole process we've developed over the last 12 years. And the questions are things like, when's the last time that you were incredibly proud of your community? Questions like, what do you love about this town? Questions like, who in town does everyone love to hate? What's the most interesting thing happening here around innovation or the economy that no one talks about? If you were to, go grocery shopping, where would you go grocery shopping? And you start to put together this like fabric of the city. You learn the flows of people. You learn the vision, the history, the narrative everyone's running on is a good way to think about it. And as you do this, we meet with about 60 to 100 people in that process there in a community. And some of it's larger meetings too, with multiple employers, as well as maybe chambers, rotaries, whatever it is. Now, once you've understood what projects are happening, what interesting things are going on in the community, what's the historic economic opportunity, what's the historic capital, mental and financial capital, what was it created around, what's unique about the geography of the city, what outsized superpower do the community residents have that they don't even view as a superpower that you could potentially build an economy off of, keeping in mind what does the client want, and then how can you arc a new economy based on something historically and that meets what the client wants. Now comes the interesting part. The third is we have a whole fleet of executives, founders, investors, scientists, researchers, politicians, whatever it is. We have a little over 250 that we have as a part of a group that we work with. And we start to analyze the desk data, the target goals, the sentiment, and like the vibe, might we call it, the vibration of a town, and the flow. And we start to look at how could this be stacked into an innovation economy where this community can be the best in the world at doing one or two specific things. Outsized opportunity for them that respects what the people love, who they view themselves as, and honors a hidden superpower they have, accomplishes what the stakeholder wants, but creates a talent and an innovation pipeline that a specific vertical or industry would then look at this weird community of 600 people and say, why does everyone in this town create companies, file patents, and learn skills that complement our industry? You can start to build a very clear relationship between a physical geography being an R&D lab, an innovation and talent engine, a literal geographically confined space with typically some form of a college or a cooperative extension, K-12 program, some economic engine, some political engine where they could even pass laws that sub special economic zones. And it's not about getting a big corporation to move there. It's about creating the platform that gets a big corporation in all of the vertical, the industry's attention to say, this little town of 600 people is incredible. How do we support them? How do we support their talent? How do we invest in their companies? Then you're building from the bottom up versus trying to import major corporations into a community. Foreign direct investment's nice, but the real superpower that starts to solve for the social, civic, and economic malaise of a community is when people are moving towards a sense of a vision and an identity that they know reflects themselves, and they start to view themselves as, we're building something powerful. And if you can get an industry to pay attention to those people, it brings dignity, and you grow something that's stable and diversified versus a single employer that moves into a town, that when they leave, so do all the jobs. Not to mention, if a big employer comes into a community and the community's not aligned at all with them, often it's like a town and gown attitude, much like universities and the cities, where it feels like, oh, that thing is in charge of all of us, and that's why we're here. And it's not a great relationship. And so really, you don't want to give up massive tax incentives to get a corporation to move there and give up land so that everyone can have a job. You want to create the kind of city where everyone has a social system of gatherings that help them set goals, learn skills, and gather together to celebrate, hold each other accountable, ship their dreams of these goals, growth, and gatherings that are aligned with the local, state, and industry needs. And each person's in their own authentic way, creating their own version of a startup. That's how we approach doing this whole realignment of social gatherings, economic outputs, workforce, labor, schools, startups, special economic zones, angel investors to be able to support this in towns of all sizes. I could get into a lot more on other pieces around the social programming of using appreciative inquiry to create that loop. If you are interested in this, sign up for our podcast. Go to americandreamfactory.com. There's going to be a link in the different episodes that you can fill out a form there. I'll put it in the show notes here too, but you can fill out the form and it will give you an opportunity to be subscribed to not only these, but also gatherings we do in locations where we come together, and we have physical gathering spaces across the United States, all sorts of trainings. But if you also want to grab my book, it'll tell you more on this as well. We do two types of content. One is we work directly with entrepreneurs and tech talent and founders, and we build that backbone of people creating things in communities, and we provide mentorship to them. So recently we interviewed the CEO. I interviewed the CEO of the North Face, and that was for founders and tech talent and marketers and people in all the communities we work with. So that's one division called Build. And then Innovation Collective is where we provide content, training, design, and thought leadership for governments, corporations, real estate developments, nonprofits, and we help design solutions. We call them flourishing plans to realign and set up the system for cities. And then we have softwares and tools, project management tools, marketing documents, and using the principles of gamification, we've also built digital tools that help the city play the game of building their economy. So that's the other side, is Innovation Collective. And it all sits underneath this whole kind of vision of the American Dream Factory, which I'll end it with this. The American Dream Factory is not an American thing. The American dream is a shared global experiment of people around the world who decided they wanted to come and explore a new country, a new land where they could pursue what they believe they could go and accomplish. And in a lot of ways is what happened. There's a lot of, it's messy at times, and it's an ongoing experiment, but it's a beautiful one at that. And anytime anybody bothers me that they say the American dream or calling something the American dream is so, I don't know, closed-minded about all the other countries in the world. The American dream is something special. And that's why we all kind of, came to America, right? To pioneer something new. So it's more about the spirit and unleashing that everywhere through two different types of content and trainings and systems that we have. Neil Milet, I hope you are navigating COVID in a town of 600 in Indiana. It's everywhere. Just kind of, it's part of life right now, and it hits us, some of us harder than others. I hope you're okay, buddy. Drink some soup, get some sleep. And again, if you want to check anything out, you can head over to AESOP, AESOP Industries.com. That's our parent engine that we've created that kind of has all the different components that we leverage to support communities and governments as we kind of unleash communities and economies. I believe economics can actually be social, which sounds weird, but it inherently is. It's not just boring work. It's actually about dreaming and building. And I also believe no person actually, their highest dream is of getting a job. I think everyone has something they want to create, and it is your job and my job to get that out of us. And we're doing our best to create systems that unleash that in you and I. If you need anything, you can reach out to me, Nick@buildcities.com. And I'm going to go now. Sorry, it wasn't an hour and a half with Neil. For those of you who might be watching, maybe you didn't want it to be an hour and a half of just me, but I'll make it short and sweet. And if you thought this was fun and you'd like more of these where I talk about methodologies and practices, I could talk about setting up partnerships with universities where you bring in sabbaticals to create PhD programs and work with the state. We did that. I have a mug here from Yoshi Kanamiya, Dr. Kanamiya. He is a professor in robotics that came and did a 6-month sabbatical with a land grant university that we set up. And it in turn became a really cool PhD program in robotics. It's away from the land grant. And now it's a full computer science program that goes from a community college to the land grant. But the land grant isn't here. It's in a whole other part of the state. But there's a powerful program with a cool robotics lab. Dr. Shovik and the engineering department at the university have done incredible things. But that's a fun story. So if you found this interesting, let me know. Happy to do more of it. Thank you. And reach out to me, nick@buildcities.com. I'm going to go now as I hang up. Goodbye.